Hello and welcome back to another Be Connected session. I'm Emily, your host once again, and today we're looking at an introduction to digital photography. This is covering everything from digital devices like iPads. I have a particularly large one on display today, your mobile phone, all the way to professional grade DSLR cameras. This one I've had for some years, so it's not a current model. They've improved quite a bit over the years. And they've become even more specky with more knobs and buttons and doodads and things like that. So if you've got one at home, yours might look a little different to mine, but they generally function with the same programming and terms. So I'll go through that in a little bit as well. So at first, let's jump in to see what we're going to be looking at today. So if it clicks, there we go. So first we're jumping into digital cameras, as in physical cameras that are just made to be cameras, essentially, not your mobile, that will be many different functions. And then we'll jump into mobile device cameras, so iPhones, Android phones, iPads, tablets, everything that's not a point and click, point and shoot camera. We'll briefly talk about photo editing, especially the programs that come with your own device already. As well as some that are on social media apps and places where you'd actually share your photos. They also offer some slight photo editing, and I'll mention Photoshop briefly, but it's not really it can be harder for people to get into unless you are a professional grade photographer and are looking to really edit your photos at that top level. And then we'll look into downloading and sharing your photos. This is a much talked about topic. I get asked it quite often while I'm at work here at the library. People will say, I've got photos on this camera, I'd love them on my computer, how do I go about that? And there are many different ways, and I'll talk about that as well. Let's have a look first at Be Connected. This is the content that I take from off the website from Be Connected. Be Connected is essentially a government-based initiative to get every Australian online. Everyone who is starting from the very basics of using current technology and moving onward from there. So I'll quickly jump you over to Be Connected. It has a broad range of topics. I do this every presentation. I always forget to mention everything. Broad range of topics, self-paced, so there's nothing egging you on to go to the next thing. You just pick the topics you'd like to learn about, sit back, watch a few videos, maybe click through a few slides, and that's about all you need to be doing. Very easy to use, something I recommend to just about everyone. It's as long as you have a computer, you can access it. If you don't have a computer, each course comes with its own printable PDF document. So you can print it off this course to give to a friend maybe who doesn't have access to a computer, and they can see it that way. And you can also sign up to keep track of your training. So this way it would give you a little tick box and tell you what you've learned already and what things you might like to learn about next. So that's a nice thing to do as well. Let me jump onto my Google Chrome here. So here is Be Connected. You can find it just by Googling Be Connected online on Google, and you'll be able to find it here. It's recently had a bit of a freshen up. So there's a few new graphics that look quite cool and a few new courses. So to find courses, we go into the topic library here. So again, this is the stuff that I'm basing my presentation off of. It's amongst if I scroll all the way down, it starts from things like the absolute basics, moving on to getting started online and online safety, how to, what is data, Wi-Fi, all this stuff. Large questions that you may not have time to ask someone about, and maybe we just like to have a look yourself. Let me find what I'm looking for. It's not an online hobbyist. It is digital photography though, so I would imagine it's amongst here. I should know where this is. I've had a look at it several times this week. Here we go, more online skills. So that's where we're going to be looking at today. I won't be going through the whole website, of course. I'll just skim through it here and using a digital camera. These come with some lovely short videos, and they go through the very basics of the camera. And then you can print off the guide as well for a friend or yourself if you don't want to be using a computer. So that's how you do that one. Let's continue through back to the PowerPoint. There we go. So that was Be Connected. Let's now have a look at cameras in all their glory, all varieties and everything. So I'm going to be talking about three to start with. They're not majorly important. The differences, well, there are major differences, but if you've got a camera, you'll be able to, still take photos and shoot. So first we'll look at compact cameras. These are your small handheld, they're no I mean, they could fit in your palm most of the time. Some get a little bit larger, but essentially you can always point and click with one hand. It's a nice, easy, light system. Great for taking traveling. They're point and shoot cameras, so it's a simple aim it at what you're looking to take a photo of, and then you click the shutter, and that's all you have to do. Again, small, compact design. They're great for beginners and have a very simple interface. They're not asking for several different things like we'll look at with our bridge cameras or our DSLR cameras. They have automatic shooting modes, so you're going to get the best shot every time. It may not look perfect, which is what you get with a professional grade camera. You'll be able to get the perfect balance of light and shadow, contrast and exposure. But with your compact cameras, you get a brilliant amount of functionality while it's still being very inexpensive. So they're not hard to buy, or not hard to buy is a weird phrase. They aren't expensive in comparison to other cameras. You might find that you do just love using your own device. So I keep holding up my enormous iPad that we have at work here. You might just like using your phone, and that's the quality you're happy with. And you've always got your phone on you, so you can point and click, take a photo right away. If you'd like something a little more specialized, jump into a compact camera and give it a go. They come in varieties that are waterproof, shockproof, essentially adventure proof. So if you were to go on a bit of a rougher holiday, so if maybe you're mountain trekking or doing a lot of walks and things like that, that might be a safer bet to get a digital camera that is dedicated for taking those pictures. The next we're going to be looking at are bridge cameras. These are a great all-rounder camera. They're for someone who's looking for a bit more functionality, more controls, but still want that sort of lighter point and click aspect to it. So they're very similar to DSLRs, which are the professional grade cameras. They have a large lens, often full glass, it's beautiful, but they will be fixed in the actual body of the camera. This means you can't switch out lenses to try new things, which you can get with the DSLR. They've got almost all the same features. They'll have a viewfinder, which is a big deal. A viewfinder, if you're not sure of the term, is this eye hole piece, essentially. So other digital cameras like compact cameras are just going to have one large screen, and it's going to show you exactly what you're seeing, and that's what the image will look like. A viewfinder lets you look through the actual lens of the camera. So what it does, this is the digital representation of the image it's seeing. But if you look through here, it's going to be reflected through mirrors, and that's what you'll see as well. You can get bridge cameras and DSLRs that are mirrorless, meaning there isn't a physical mirror, and I'll show you here as well. I'll take my lens off. So mine is a DSLR with a lens that comes off. I don't want to expose it too much. If you can see, this may be very tricky. I might even switch it back to my screen. One moment. All right, stop share. There we go. So if we have a look at my lens here, you can see this is where your eye would sit. So I'm putting my finger where my eye is. So that's there. You can kind of see it there. Yeah. And then underneath that is a mirror. So a physical mirror that moves, closes, flips with a shutter. Well, the mirror shouldn't move, I don't think. Maybe it does. I've not seen it move. But that is what you view your actual subject with a physical mirror through the lens itself. Whereas a, clip it back on now. There we go. Let's see if it'll behave. This is what happens with live presentations. Things just go awry. I'll fix it in a second. Okay, excellent. Let me go back to my presentation, which I have on PowerPoint. One moment. Thank you very much. So you'll be able to look through the viewfinder and look at the lens and get a very great sense of clarity of what you're about to take a photo of versus holding it up at about the level of your eye in order to see it with the screen. So it really depends on what you'd like. I know people who hate looking through a viewfinder, they find it quite hard. Pressing up against your eye isn't exactly comfortable. And if you're taking lots of photos, I've done this before. I've been like sort of scrunched up my eye for so long that my face has become like cramped up. So if you don't mind that, that's great to have with a bridge camera. It's a great in-between compact and DSLR, and they're somewhat less expensive. So they're a great starting off point if you'd like to see how you'd go with one with a large lens that can do quite a lot without it being too expensive and maybe too much of a commitment as well. And they're also lighter, which is a big thing. because you will be holding it and carrying around all day. So like bulk as well is a big thing. So DSLRs, what are they called that? What is the name? They are called digital single lens reflex cameras, meaning that they contain that little mirror inside. I think I've got it. I can't believe I can't get my camera to go back. I could just have the lens off, then it'll get dust in it. Getting dust in your body of your camera is a big deal, so best not to do it. It was going so well too. Oh well, I'll sit it down, and maybe when we have a question break, I'll be able to put it back on and show you it again. So this is for professional grade photography. They have a plethora of manual controls, which we'll talk about in just a second, and I might overwhelm you with the amount we have here. But I'd just like to give you an idea of what you might be getting into if it's something you'd like to explore. And if you've already got one but haven't used it in a long time, or got it as a gift and don't know how to use it, it'll definitely teach you a few things. They have interchangeable lenses, as exemplified here, which you can change different sizes, different glass, and they have different properties or reasons to use them. For me, this is a basic, I don't know the number, 55 millimeter, I assume, which is great for all over photography. It can do portrait, it can do landscape shots. Shorter lenses are brilliant for portraits in particular. They have a wonderful aperture where you have the blurred background and then the in-focus subject and a very short depth of field, which is what you're looking for in portraiture for the most part, and maybe even close-up nature photography. Like if you're photographing a butterfly, for example, that would look beautiful. They're also expensive. I got this as a birthday present maybe about 7 years ago now, and that was a big deal. It was very exciting. And they're also bulky. So with this one, I'm holding the lens together because I've forgotten how to close it. You do need to hold it with two hands. I'll hold about my lens like so, mostly because you're going to be hitting buttons and flicking switches, which do require two hands. I've done it with one hand. It kind of gets heavy. You tilt, you shift. Not great. Always wear your strap as well. Keep yourself safe and your camera safe. Just pointing a naked camera at you. So sorry. So they're a two-handed variety and they are very bulky. So you have to have your own carrying case, of course, unless you're feeling particularly lucky that day. You're not going to trip over and break your camera. But they do take a little bit of extra care, unlike what I'm giving mine right now. But they will give you the top-notch professional grade photography that you would probably love. So let's look into DSLR cameras a little bit more, the features, and I'll go into depth of each of these points here. So they have many shooting modes. So the dial on the top of the camera body, as you might have seen, is fairly complex. Again, I'm not going to open my camera, but you can just sort of tell there are lots of symbols up here, and you flick through each to get a different function. And I'll talk about what those functions are in a second. They have auto, manual, AV, TV, and P, depending on where your cameras come from. I have a Canon, and those are what they're called on my camera. I think Nikon has different terms. Like for example, TV is S for speed because it's a anti-blur shot. It's the sports mode. So they'll just have different terms, but they'll do the same function. We'll talk about the exposure triangle. These are the three important things you need to think about when exposing a piece of film. But in this case, it's not a piece of film, it's a digital, digital receiver. And these are the aperture, the shutter speed, and the camera's ISO. I'll talk about each of these in some length. I'll try not to bore you. And then we'll look at exposure and light metering. So it just determines the exposure of your photo, how much light it's receiving, and if it's too much light as well. So these are what we're going to look at. Let's start off with the shooting modes. So it determines how your camera behaves when you press the shutter. So if we had it set on AV, so you can see at the top there in my graphic, we have a mode dial. Oh, Barbara's raised a hand. Hello, Barbara. Would you like to pop a question in? Are we just waving, saying hello? That's okay as well. If you have a question, please pop it in the Q&A section. I'll get right to you. So aperture priority is talking about the size of how wide the lens is opening to accept visual information. So when you have it on AV priority, you will set the aperture size. The camera will take over and take on the shutter speed. We'll talk about, again, the exposure triangle, and we'll talk about why it's important that the camera balances it for you. But of course, in manual mode, which you can see at the bottom with an M, manual, you get free reign of everything, and you have to balance each thing as you go. If you're not fully versed in it, it can take a bit of time to get the tweaking right for each scene that you've set up, or lighting set, or daytime, afternoon sort of thing you've got going on. So that can be a lot more to think about, but having it on either AV or TV is a great start. And then program as well does both at the same time, depending on which you'd like to change. So this is all very confusing. Let me clarify. Aperture priority, and talking about an aperture, this is what we get here. So if we're talking about a large aperture, we're talking about how much light is being let in. It's letting in a lot if it's large, and if it's small, it's going to be letting in far less. What this does is it changes how the background is received, how much light information is being received. So if something was quite close to you and you had a lovely background, my lovely older gentleman in the background, for example, if you took a photo of my hand and had a very large aperture, you'd be letting in a lot of light at once, having a large focus. It would only capture my hand in focus, and then the background would be out of focus. So I'll talk about that in a tick as well. And if the aperture was very small, which is a high f-stop number, and they're all talked about in f-stops. So for example, on my graphic here, we've got an f-stop of 2.8, f-stop 4.0, and onward. So if we had the f-stop of, what is it here, 16, you'd be able to get the whole range of focus in. You'd get my hand, you get the wall, the poster, everything. If you were outside, you'd get a mountain range, or the hills, or the bush, whatever you can see out your window, or the suburbs, I suppose. That's what I've got here. And you'd be able to shoot that as well. So I'll quickly jump over to my Q&A section. I think I got a question from Barbara. Let's have a look. Yes, so Barbara's asking, are we going to talk about photos on iPhone? We are indeed, absolutely. I know this is a lot to take in. You're welcome to go grab a cup of tea if I'm just overflowing you with information you don't think you'll use. We're definitely going to talk about iPhones and using your camera on your actual phone and your iPad device. Absolutely. So if we're talking about aperture again, if we're looking at an AV aperture priority, if we're thinking of a large aperture, which again has a smaller number, just to make it confusing, we have an f-stop of 4.5, which allows this little creature, is it a beaver? It's very cute, whatever it is. It's in focus while its background is totally out of focus. If you look at TV priority, so shutter priority, this is essentially sports mode. It'll have a very quick shutter to catch the movement of someone. So if you're at a sports day, you've got someone running across a field, you want to catch them in motion, perfectly frozen, no blur. You'd have a very short shutter speed, and you need a lot of light for that to work. The shorter your shutter, the less light that's going to come in, and the less exposed your image will be. So the workaround for that is to give it a larger aperture, so the actual eye of the camera opens wider. The shutter priority lets it open for longer, so for example. But if you have it open very wide and have a quick shutter, you're going to get a better balance of light in that, because you're letting a lot of light in with your aperture and not very much light with your shutter. You can also update, or change your ISO, which is the sensitivity of the film. For those who have used film cameras, and I'm sure many of you have, I still use disposable cameras at home. They'll have a ISO on their film. The ISO will be something like 100, 200, 400. You can sometimes get 800 film and onward. Beyond 800 is quite a specialty, and I'll talk about why in a little bit. But essentially, TV priority and shutter priority will freeze a subject in motion. So for example, this bird is frozen in mid-flight because we've had a very, very quick shutter, and we've had to open the aperture very wide, which again means it's a large aperture, as we did with the little beaver here. The very large aperture means more light can come in, and we can have a very quick shutter, meaning it's going to be still well lit. We're going to see all the detail, but it'll be caught in mid-flight as if it was frozen. So you can see its background is totally blurred. You couldn't make that out if you tried. It's probably bushland maybe. And then you've got a very sharp bird caught in flight. Very cool. Program mode then works on, it's sort of a mix of the two, so AV and TV mode. You'll pick, while on program, you'll just update one and it'll fix the other one for you to balance it out. So if you'd like a little more help, program's great. So if you're not ready to go right into AV or TV mode, P for program is the best. Manual mode, again, is all the reins are off, you do everything yourself, good luck. It's a lot of fun to play with. It can be hard to get that perfect exposure triangle, which is what we're talking about now. So that's the mix of the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So ISO, what is that? That is the level of light that can go on the film before it becomes overexposed. That's sort of the basic way to say it. If you have a very high ISO, it means it's extremely sensitive to light. This is great for nighttime shooting, shooting at dusk or dawn, maybe more dusk. If you're shooting inside at a party, for example, something like 400, 800, and then it keeps going up incrementally or exponentially. If you were shooting full daylight, bright sunny day, you only need an ISO of 100 or maybe 200 if it's a bit shady. That's something to keep in mind. So you can see here on the camera face that we've got here, it has M for manual mode. Then it has the shutter speed. So it's 1/500th of a second. So again, manual, 1/500th of a second in the shutter speed. And then the f-stop is 0.05, which is fairly big still. And then 400, which means it's probably an afternoon or a shady scene. 400 is pretty good for indoor as well. If you've got well-lit room, but it's indoors, 400 is good because it's still sensitive enough to catch a lot of the detail while not washing out your image. The other thing to keep in mind are the light meters. So underneath here, so everything else, it's quite a lot to look at, as you can see. This is a busy screen. But the next thing to keep in mind, other than the first three markers, the exposure triangle, so again, aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, the next thing to look at is light metering. So when you're looking through your lens, you can actually see a little light meter working away as you hold down the shutter halfway. So you do this to autofocus if you've got autofocus on. Of course, with lenses like this, you can twist and turn and focus and zoom as you do that way. Mine's on autofocus right now, which you can see by, well, maybe you can't see, it's very small. I have an AF and an MF. So AF autofocus, MF manual focus, which means when I hold the shutter halfway down and you can feel it, you can go 1, 2, so you go 1 halfway, 2 is click. I don't know if you can hear it. Doesn't help. If you hold it halfway, it's going to show you the light meter and it will show you how much light it's receiving and if it's too much. This will be sort of a generalized what it's seeing. It'll generally be on the very point of where you're pointing at, so the focal point of the lens. So if it's at the center, that's going to be where it's measuring the light for the most part, but it will kind of pick up the ambient light in the full image and try and give you an idea. So for example, with this light meter, which I've got a little expanded view up here, this one is set just below 0. So 0 here is perfectly exposed, not over or under. -2, for example, is much under, so underexposed, and +2 is overexposed. When an image is overexposed, it's going to be looking washed out. There's just too much white in it. Shadows will be lost, details will be lost. You can overexpose a face and then you'll lose a lot of the details and features. You might lose someone's eyebrows, for example. Underexposed, however, means that all the bright light tones are going to be darkened to grays and shadows, and you're going to look washed out as well. So it depends what you prefer, but of course, dead center is the best. Some scenes you'll need to just sort of treat with care. You'll go, okay, well, this is a very sunny scene. I'd like to see the shadow detail. So maybe you might knock it down a few notches down into the underexposed area. So yeah, so that'll drop it down. So you're not getting too much light. It'll sort of slow it down and keep it out. It's a very clever system. Somewhat difficult to learn right away, so give it a go. You usually change your light meter with your scroll wheel. So it's a little light wheel. And as you flick it through, you'll note that the little cursor that is underneath the numbers will move either one way or the other. And from there, when you take the photo, it'll change the exposure to what you want it to be. This can be left on full auto mode. It just sort of lets you know what you've got going on and what it's seeing. And from there, it's up to you or the camera, if you've got it on automatic, to fix it up for you as it goes. So do it on the fly. And of course, if you'd like more tips on DSLRs, because we're going to move on in just a tick, I recommend this website, digitalphotographyschool.com, and have a look at learning how to use your first DSLR. I learned a lot of great tips from there. I picked up on a few things that I'd forgotten over the years and hadn't been using. So it's a great place to check it out. So digitalphotographyschool.com. Next, oh, here we go. This is ISO. I forgot to mention more ISO. So for example, if you had a very, again, it was talking about underexposure, overexposure with ISO, bright scene, it's going to be 100 is preferred. Dark scene could be 800. If you've got like a sundown, evening, twilight kind of time of day, with this one, they've thrown up the ISO all the way to 4000, which you can do on digital cameras. With film, it's preset because you put the film in and it's just one exposure level. But with this, it's 4000, which means it's letting a lot of light in. Yes, it's letting a lot of light in, but because it is so dark, the camera is having to make up a lot of information to fill in the gaps, which creates noise or grain. So you can see here tiny little dots in the background, not perfectly clear. Noise and grain isn't too distracting. It just depends on how large you'd like your image to be in the final product. If you were to print it or put it on a screen somewhere, have it displayed quite large, you would be able to see it. But for most people, it's nothing that would make the image lesser. In fact, it can add a bit of texture and a bit of authenticity to your image as well. Next, mobile devices and cameras. So these are for people who don't have what I have here, or a little compact camera. We're going to be looking at holding up your own phone or your own tablet and taking a photo. Let's look at why you want to use this. Extremely simple to use. Available on almost all devices. You'd be hard pressed to find a phone these days that doesn't have a camera, a smartphone that is. I don't expect your home phone or a phone on a cord to have a camera, of course. These are devices that are smart, they're connected to the internet, or yeah, they can essentially connect to the internet. That's what smart means in this way. They're easy shooting and they have great shooting modes preset. And they have inbuilt editing tools. So you can change things like the contrast, exposure, you can sharpen your image all through your Photos app on your phone. So let's have a look at the camera app. Let's jump in. So these are some hints and tips that you might appreciate if you've been using your camera phone for quite a while. I keep saying camera phone. I just mean to say mobile device or your own device. So let's have a look. I've got a extraordinarily large iPad today. Ta-da! And we're going to go through each of these as we go. We might skip a couple if you think that you know them already. For example, my last tip is clean the lens. Keep the lens clean, which I'm sure most of us know. I definitely forget, and sometimes I'll bring up my phone and go, oh, it's a bit smeared, and I go, oh, I've got a fingerprint on that or something like that. So keep that in mind, that if your image isn't looking clear, that could be the reason. Other things to keep in mind are how much light you're receiving. Did you move your camera as you took the photo? Were you shaking and things like that? So that would make it blurry. So use grid lines to balance your image. So some cameras come with grid lines already in there. The way to get them is through settings. So I'll have to find them on mine because this is a very large iPad. And if we're going to be taking photos, we want to have the best start. So I'll just see if I can't find grid lines. I'd love to just look camera. So with mine, let's go back to my screen with my big old face on it. Here we go. Fabulous. So I've gone to settings. This is in, I've got an iPad here. So they're Apple settings. Can you read that? We've got a set of options we can turn on and off, and I'll list them because, quite frankly, I don't know if you could read that. Maybe not. We've got, for example, grid. It's on there. I'm going to turn mine on and show you what it looks like. It's going to be a 9-box grid, 3x3. And then also lets you know, okay, how would you like to record your video? Would you like it in the highest possible? Oh my goodness, this has 4K. Goodness me. 720p, the top option, is perfectly fine for most devices. If you're not looking to stream your video to a large television, 720 is fine, and it saves a lot of space when recording video. So if you find that maybe you've been using up a lot of space on your device, you need more room, jump into your camera settings, which you can just find by typing camera into the search bar on an Apple device at least. I know I have a search bar on my Android phone, so that's another way to do it. And I went into the record settings. So record video, and you can change it to any value you'd like. The top value here at 720 is the smallest option it supplies. The highest is 4K at 60 frames per second, which is a lot, and will fill up your device very quickly. So if you're doing a professional grade filming of something, yes, you can have it at 4K, amazing. Most televisions only handle 1080p, so 1080 pixels. I'm going to say pixels is what it is. Yes. Anyway, that's the measurement video, and 1080 is very high. It's going to look very clean and crisp. 720 is always going to look good as well, just not as crispy as 1080. And 4K is just mind-blowingly clear. Most TVs don't have 4K. New ones, most of the new ones do have 4K on them. So if you wanted to share it to your computer or your TV screen, some can handle 4K resolution, but you may not notice it on older devices. You just won't see how clear it is. You'll think it's very clear because it's about 1080p, much more than 1080p. But yeah, I've not found that I've seen many 40K screens for the most part. And it talks about things like, would you like HDR? Now, HDR I've mentioned in my PowerPoint. I'll have to refer back to it because it's a little bit complex. HDR stands for High Dynamic Range, which means that if you find your image is overexposed or has a lot of contrast, you can turn on High Dynamic Range, and it captures more detail in the shadows and highlights and works actively to fix them as you go. Give it a try if your device offers HDR and see if it's something you like. Some people say it kind of takes away a bit of the control you have over your own image, and some say it just makes it look really good. Really good, very easily, and you don't have to worry about too many shadows. So that's how you turn on the grid line at least. And now that I've turned mine on, you'll be able to see. Okay, maybe you won't be able to see. It's some very fine grid lines. Let's have a look. And we'll have a look at autofocusing and exposure at the same time as we go to my next screen, just so we're not missing out on what we're seeing in the PowerPoint. So let's go back to my face. Here I am. So I don't know if you can notice this. You can see my lovely gentleman behind me, who is our promotional poster sir for digital mentoring. Be Connected. I also do digital mentoring through Be Connected. Just getting confused. And you can see, just trying to see if you can see. I'll put it on my laptop. Well, there are grid lines. They may be very fine and hard to see. We've got 1, 2, 3, like so. What they suggest with grid lines is that you can create a brilliant balance in your photo and create an intrigue if you sort of follow the rule of thirds. The idea is that the subject of your image should take up about 1/3 of the frame of the screen, and by mixing with the indices and different boxes, you can kind of get a very, what's the term? It's an interesting image. It's appealing to the eye, it's aesthetically pleasing. So give the rule of thirds a try, trying to fill the spaces with your subject while also not sort of overfilling it as well. Yeah, that's about as much as I can talk about rule of thirds at least. The next thing I'd like to talk about, which not everyone knows about, is autofocus. So this camera is fairly intelligent in that it's trying to find his face, and it's going, this is the thing I want to focus on. It's this gentleman's face. He's smiling. He wants a photo. What you can also do, if you find that your photo is not focusing on the thing you want, hold it up to what you want, and pardon the wiggly screen. It's hard to hold. It's very big. If you find that it's not focusing on what you want it to focus on, give it a tap, and you'll find that a very small yellow box will come up and actively change the camera focus to set it to what you like. So when holding up your phone, ready to go, give it a tap on the thing you want to focus on and see if it does it properly. If it doesn't, give another tap, maybe move your camera around. Don't be afraid to walk closer to your subject, but if you're, say, viewing a landscape or somewhere very far away, there are also zoom controls. So this one has, I wouldn't think it's a digital zoom. I feel like it's optical zoom. The difference between digital and optical zoom is that with optical zoom, it uses the lens to actively move and change, and that'll give you a different zoom. So what optical zoom is here on this camera is me actually turning the lens to make it go closer and further. You can see it actually change length as it changes zoom function. So this would be very far away, and this is much closer. So that's optical zoom, where the actual lens is functionally moving and changing. Digital zoom, I don't know if it has digital or optical, I wouldn't be able to tell. It's too good, it's what it is. You would actually zoom into the image by expanding it. So you're not actually getting closer and the lens isn't changing. It's just going with its sort of computer mind. Sorry, it's a bizarre phrase. It's actually zooming in closer and further using just a magnify tool. It's not necessarily getting any closer or making the image that much clearer, but it will make the thing you're focusing on very large in the screen. Optical zoom is preferred. It's a lot clearer, higher fidelity of image, but digital zoom, nothing too much wrong with it. When you get very, very, very close to things, so if you go all the way up on the zoom, you're going to be getting, it's hard to tell because he's an image, not a real person. And I'm going, I can see the pixels. That could just be because he's a poster. When you have optical zoom, it's going to look a lot like a very, very zoomed in picture, and it may even break down into pixels at one point. Whereas optical zoom isn't going to do that. It's going to stay very clear the whole time. So that's zoom, that's focus. Let's look at exposure. So say our gentleman here, his face is very washed out, although that's only on the screen that you're viewing. For me, it looks perfectly balanced. But say if I want to make it a little darker, I want to change the exposure to make it less exposed. I'm going to be clicking on the highlight button, and if you can see it, there is a tiny sun next to the image. If you give that sun a tap, it'll come up with a little line beside it, and you can click and drag that line up and down, and it will change the exposure level. So say, oh, it's too bright. I'm going, okay, I need it a bit darker. You'll bring that exposure level down. And that's a way to sort of balance your own exposure on your own terms just by clicking up and down. So give that a try sometime when you're outside in a sunny scene, or if it's changed to a cloudy day, or if you're in the shade. See what kind of difference it makes for you to see that exposure go up and down, and see if maybe your camera hasn't been getting it right every time. I have another question in QRA. QRA, what am I saying? In Q&A from Barbara. Thanks for waiting, Barbara. I think I took a little while. Where do you go on your phone to put grids up? So for me, on an iPad, so if you're using an iPhone, you go into settings, so the little gear icon. If you don't have an iPad, you've got an Android phone or Android tablet, it's also going to be a gear. It might say system settings, system preferences, something like that. I'll go into settings here. For me, I'm looking for a little camera symbol for the most part. I just typed in camera right into the search bar because for me, it's a lot quicker than searching through each symbol. You will be able to find it eventually. There it is at the bottom. So on the current version of Apple's iOS, if you're looking for the camera, you go all past general, all past mail, and you get into where you can see photos, and just under photos is camera. And from there, you'd have where you can put the grid lines on. So hopefully that answers your question, Barbara. Beautiful. Excellent. So let's jump back to, I think I've covered a couple of things so far on iPads especially. Let's jump back to our tips and tricks on our PowerPoint. Another thing to keep in mind, try using different camera modes. So if I bring it back to my camera, it comes with a preset list along the side and you can flick through. So for example, video, slow motion video, time lapse. These are all offered on the Apple products. Different cameras have more specs or fewer specs. So you may not have these, this software that does this, but you also may have many more depending on sort of the age of your phone or device, and if it's it promotes cameras and things like that, because some newer phones, the focus on it is having many, many lenses on their phone. The Apple iPhone has 3, I think there's 4 somewhere, maybe a Google phone, and that's got a huge emphasis on taking photos on your phone. The next things to flick through, you have portrait mode. Portrait mode, I want to highlight quickly. Portrait mode, oh, it's got my own face. Portrait mode, if you'll see, I took one of myself. Portrait mode actively blurs the background of your subject while keeping the face totally in focus. So it's a lot like using a large aperture on a DSLR camera, but it does it digitally by recognizing a face and then automatically blurring the background using camera technology, using digital technology rather than your actual lens functioning to do that. So that's very cool. Next thing is burst mode. So if you want to turn that on, sometimes holding down the photo button, what am I calling this, the shutter, sometimes it does, not in this case. But it's there. You don't have to go into settings to find burst mode. It's somewhere in here. I've not had a look very deep, but I don't find I have had to use burst mode that often. The next thing, which is a key trick, which if you've not heard of, is using the volume buttons to take a photo. So mine are up here, and you can hear takes a photo. So you can click that rather than pressing the button on the screen if that's a lot easier. I find that with something like this, which is very large, pressing the volume button is much easier than reaching down and pressing the button while you're holding it at the same time. It's better to brace it with 2 hands and click the volume button to take a photo. So that's a few neat tips and tricks. Let's jump on through to downloading and sharing your photos. So I get a lot of questions at the library regarding, oh, I have a question from Sandy. Sorry, Sandy, I've missed that. Does your iPhone have both digital and optical zoom or only digital? It really depends on the age of your phone and whether or not it had that feature sort of advertised as well. It's a big deal to have optical zoom. It's a lot of extra moving parts and a lot of extra glass in a lens, which can be quite expensive, which is the reason DSLRs are as expensive as they are. The glass and the actual physical bits inside a camera are very expensive and hard to work with. So that's why it's more expensive. Your camera or your phone will have it advertised quite excitedly because they put a lot of work into it. It's very expensive. So unless you can't see, well, you could try this. You could look at the lens itself as you're moving the zoom in and out and see if anything adjusts. It's probably too minuscule to see. But what you can do usually is if you zoom really close to something and if you see the image sort of breaking down to pixels and large splodges versus still very crisp image, it's most likely digital zoom. Digital zoom is inexpensive to do. It's not hard to make on phones. So it's going to be on every phone. So if you've got zoom, it's definitely digital. But if your camera or your phone is much newer, it might even be optical as well. Especially if you've got one of the newer iPhones that has 3 or 2 lenses, that's going to have optical and digital, and they're going to use them interchangeably depending on what setting you're using. So yes, generally I say they have digital for sure, but you may also have optical. Let's have a look at how to back up your photos. So for those of you who have too many photos on your phone, like myself, you need somewhere to put them unless you'd like to go through each of them and delete them, which is the sensible thing to do, but who has time for that? So the first thing I recommend is using Google Photo. It's a free app you can download from either the Apple App Store or it comes pre-installed with Android devices. Android, of course, is largely owned by Google, not fully. The software is made by Google as well as many other, like Motorola, things like that. So their products are going to be set on their phone to begin with. So Google has Google Photos already preset on Android. Again, free to use. You just have to sign up with an account. And what it does, it can back up the photos from your phone to this sort of cloud drive. So it's another version of cloud. And you can even create albums that you can do if you like. You can turn on settings that let it sort of scan your image and pick out things. So if you were to type dog into your photos that you've got saved on Google Photo, you'd be able to find all the images you've ever taken of every dog that it can recognize as a dog, for example. It can put people's faces all into one album. So you could name it like Emily's album and it'll be all my face in various photos. It's very clever. It's a great way to, I'll talk about it more in a little bit as well. Great way to share photos and save photos for later use. Dropbox has a logo here. I use it quite frequently to get photos from A to B, not necessarily to save photos. You get a limited storage. I think it's either 4 gigabytes. Actually, maybe it's 50 gigabytes. That makes more sense since images are quite big. I think it's 50, yes, for free. You can subscribe after that point. But again, I recommend Google Photo first because it's free and it's unlimited. Google has the monopoly on this. They're very keen and pleased that they have everyone's sort of faith and things like that. So it's nice to have a bit of competition, but Google is winning, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what side you're on. So Dropbox is great for setting up an account maybe on your PC or your Mac computer, and then having it on your phone, and you can send files one to the other. It's great for anything from Word documents to PDF files, Excel documents, to photos and videos as well. You can even send pictures on Dropbox to other people that you've known on Dropbox. Again, you have to look up their name and make them a friend and things like that. But that's another way to send photos around and files around safely. Other one is not Google Drive. What is Google Drive? There are several Google products that let you do it. Let me see if I've got it. I haven't got my phone handy. Otherwise, very trustworthy. I like Google Photo and Dropbox. Other choices you can do are iCloud and iCloud storage or cloud storage. These can be behind a paywall. They usually have a limit, but your phone will often come with an amount of free cloud storage as long as you sign in and have a password and everything. That way you can retrieve your photos when they're ready. So if you're confused about the cloud, which I generally have always been confused about the cloud, essentially in sort of bizarre terms as I'm going to use, it'll send up your image up into the internet. Somewhere there will be a large memory bank, large storage unit where CPUs are humming and doing their work. Your image will be changed back down into smaller bits. Every image bit of information is made up of bytes, megabytes, gigabytes, etc. So they'll break it down so it's decompressed, compressed, compressed to make it small, and then they'll store it on computer servers until you request it be sent back. So when viewing a photo on cloud storage before you've downloaded it, it might look a bit pixelated or a bit blurry. So this is before you've downloaded it and taken the time for it to reformat back into its highest resolution. That's kind of what the cloud is. It is kind of an amorphous idea, but yes, your information gets sent off and then can be retrieved again. You can also upload to your computer. Cameras like these come with a physical plug where you can plug in the cord that came with the camera into a computer, and then automatic photo programming will usually pick it up and go, oh, these are photos, let me download them. It used to be the case and can still be, or you'll have to download either from the internet off the camera producer's website, so Canon, for example, or you were given CDs to run in your computer and to download the program that would allow your camera to send images to your computer. Most newer computers are built with a software already for photos and can recognize cameras and then download images, so it saves a lot of time. But yeah, it depends what you're using and how old your computer is. You can also save your images to a USB or a hard drive. So external storage is a great idea. And you can also save on the memory cards that you record on originally. So in my camera, for example, at the bottom, I have a little battery pack, and then my memory card, which is, ooh, 64 gigabytes. Nice one, me. That's a lot of storage. To be fair, you do need quite a bit to get a few photos saved on this thing because the photos they take are very high quality. I've not put it up to the highest resolution. I've just got it on standard, but it's still quite a large file per photo. So it's good to have a large memory card because then you can keep banking up saved images. Let's go to the next one, Dropbox. Let's share your images with friends. So Flickr has sort of been the leading professional photography scene for quite a while, several years now. It doesn't get a lot of recognition, but it is a lot of fun, and it does sort of have everyone's photos on it. Put them on and sign up. It's not like they're not stealing your photos and putting them on, but there are many, many users in the world. For example, I looked up birds, and you can see over here how many images of birds, which were blue, because I selected the blue filter to make them all look one color. this many images came up that had birds and this color in the image. So it's a lot to look at. Great place to browse, share your own photos. I'm sure there's some permissions that let you use the photo, so maybe make it a background or something like that. But it's a lovely place to share photos in sort of a professional manner. And they're all very well done. They're excellent photos. Great place to look. Google Photos, as I promised, I was going to look at again. Google Photos can be both a cloud storage program, as well as a sharing site. So you can share full albums, little creations that you've made, photo books and things like that with your friends who also have Google Photos. So I believe you can share these sort of things to Facebook and other social media places, but then they probably have to open Google Photos themselves. So it's nice if you're happy using Google Photos, get your friends and family on and say, for example, you've messaged them or give them a ring and say, I've gone on this holiday, I've made a little photo book, have a look at it on my Google Photos page. So that's one way to do it. Do explore it if you've got time. It is lovely, it's a really clean interface, and I'm a big fan. Next is Instagram and other social media. So anywhere you can sort of type a message or post a video or photo, that's where you can do it. So Instagram is mainly made just for posting images. It's still a social networking media site. People can comment and like your image, and you can do personal messaging on Instagram, but it really is based around sharing photos and skimming through photos all day. It can be quite addictive, so keep in mind that you'll need to keep track of how much time you're using on these things. And it does chew up a little bit of data. I've fallen short a few times. I'm only on a prepaid plan because I like having it just as I go. I top it up as I want. But using Instagram, scrolling through, it's a mix of photos and video. So keep in mind that it can be quite a strain on your data balance. And of course, other social media like Facebook will let you share photos. Let's have a look at our City of Marion Library's Instagram. If you'd like some inspiration as to what a successful, I dare say, Instagram page can look like, check out City of Marion Libraries. This is run by Paula for the most part, with a lot of great design ideas by Rob. And yeah, it's a lovely site. Please like and follow us if that's something you like to do, and check us out on Facebook as well. But this is the place to check out what photos we've been taking and what we've been promoting at the time. So I think we're on to question time. We have a few minutes left. I don't want to keep you all for much longer, but if any of you have any questions or niggling thoughts and ideas or something I might have missed, please let me know and I'll get right to your questions. And what I might do, I'll just hold on for 1 second. Okay, we've just had a lovely comment from Mira. She just says thank you and a little smiley face. And that's so nice. So thank you, Mira. And Barbara has asked, when photos are stored, do they disappear from Pioneer? Now, do you mean your phone, or is Pioneer a different app? Can you let me know, Barbara, and clarify? But yes, when you store your photos, unless you opt to delete them, they won't delete by themselves. You have to do it yourself. But generally, once you've stored it, you can go back and delete because you know that it's been stored, it's saved somewhere, and then you can take it off your phone. They're very careful what they do with your photos. So when you've uploaded it, it may not delete them right away. There'll often be the option to click yes or no at the time. So keep that in mind. When your photos are stored, they shouldn't automatically be deleted off your phone, but they may be if they ask you the question, would you like us to delete your photos now? Do you want to clear your phone of those pictures? You mean iPhones? Yeah, not a problem, Barbara. Yeah, so just see at the time, do a few photos that maybe you're okay with losing if it didn't work, and just see what your phone does in particular. Each device is different, so it's always hard to tell what will happen. So yeah, keep that in mind that when you store something, I don't think it would delete it automatically. You just got another version of it stored somewhere, and then after that you would delete it. So that's what I'd say. They wouldn't automatically go away. We have a question from Sandy. Have trouble transferring pics from my camera card to iPhone 8. Yes, so transferring from your actual camera card, so your little memory card as I've got here, that can be quite difficult because what you're trying to do is get on here onto a phone. Getting this onto a computer has fewer steps. You can get card readers that plug right into a USB port on a computer. So you plug in your card and then it plugs into a USB, and that's how it can read. I recommend looking into that. That's probably the easiest way. From there, on your computer, I might try getting it on Dropbox or using Google Photos, because Google Photos can be accessed both on your computer as well as your phone. So anything you have on Google Photos, you can access on any other Google Photos account that you log into. So if it's on your computer, you log into Google Photos, you save some pictures, it'll be available on your phone as long as you log on there as well. So hopefully that helps, Sandy. It can be pretty difficult to get photos from one device to another. So try going from computer, then to your phone after that. Some cameras that are newer have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connection, meaning you can connect straight to your phone and send the images that way. So it really depends on what device you're using, of course. We have a question, another from Barbara. What program do you recommend, please, for editing pictures? Example, cropping. So if you're just looking to do cropping, most apps, so actual camera photo apps, will have it already inbuilt. So for something like an iPhone, if you look into the actual photo, there'll be a settings, or not settings, a little edit button in the corner. It'll bring up several options like changing saturation, maybe adding a filter, and also cropping. Cropping is always going to be there, and you can crop it to a square or any other aspect ratio you'd like. So keeping it on your own device is brilliant. On my phone, I use a couple. One is, there is what is it called? Photoshop Express. I think it's called Photoshop Express, I believe. If you were to go into your app store, jump on and type in Photoshop and just see what comes up. Generally in apps, Photoshop, the actual large program that professionals use, you can't get it on your phone. I think you can get it on iPad. So keep in mind that one will cost you. It's very expensive. I have a subscription to Photoshop just because I do digital painting and things like that. And it's, for me, it's a monthly payment of $30. And that is a year-long subscription. And even if I canceled it, the part of the contract is that you have it for the year and you have to keep paying. So that's a big thing to jump into. So I don't recommend using Photoshop unless it's already pre-installed on your computer. I don't recommend signing up unless you're already very comfortable with general Photoshop tools that you've played with before. Yeah, type Photoshop in. I think it's called Photoshop Express. That sounds very familiar to me. It should be a blue logo. It might just say PS for Photoshop and then EX, I think. But that's one I really like. I use that on my phone a lot, and it has a lot of extra settings. So Barbara's clarified, you'd like free programs to use on your computer after downloading images. Okay. Free versions can be found in a lot of places. Let me see if I can't get up a very brief sort of rundown. So free PC photo apps, photo editing. I'll see if anything jumps out at me. Oh, you can get Adobe Photoshop Express somewhere. Interesting. Very cool. Okay, I used to use Photoshop Express on a previous computer I had, and it was free. I didn't realize you could still download it. So maybe check out on your either your Google Play Store or your Apple App Store, depending on what computer you're using, and look for Adobe Photoshop Express. That was one of my favorites. Maybe it's only for phones. Let me double check. Okay. Looks like it has a web and mobile platform, meaning it could go on Windows. So give that a go. See if Photoshop Express comes up for you. I recommend that for on your computer as well. Let's have a look. Other ones that are recommended, these I've not tested. So this one says it's an amazing Photoshop alternative. It's called GIMP. I'll type it in chat. So GIMP, that's the name of that one. So give that a go as well. If you'd like a bit more info, give us a ring. I'd love to spend a little more time looking at particularly photo editors that are free. I tend to just use whatever my camera or the computer already has inbuilt. And if I want extra editing, like if I wanted to blur out certain things or cut and paste things and move them in the screen, I would be using the Photoshop. So try Photoshop Express first and see how far that gets you. and then maybe try GIMP or GIMP as it says here, and give that a go. Yeah, no problem, Barbara. I'm glad that was a little something to get you on. And no problem, Sandy, glad I could help. Beautiful. Okay, I've kept you long enough, so let me get to my final screen. Where can you connect with us? So check us out on our Marian Library's Facebook page. I keep all of the extra, all of our events are on there, including the ones I do here. Instagram as well, as I said before. Check out our What's On page on the Marian website. Subscribe to our newsletter, give us a call, come in person. We've actually opened again, to the surprise of many people. We are indeed open. But if you'd like to find out the next course we've got on, jump onto our City of Marian Libraries website, scroll down to Libraries, Events, What's On. So you go Venues and Facilities, Libraries, and then What's On, and click on Be Connected. So this talks about first digital mentoring I do over the phone, and then upcoming webinars like the one you're here with today. And it also has a list of previous webinars that I've done before that I've recorded. So this one today will also be recorded, and you'll be able to check it out later on. Oh good, they're all there. Brilliant. Okay, so with a final adieu, a goodbye, I'll say thank you very much. And it's been a very lovely chat with all of you. Thank you for your brilliant questions. You've been so kind and lovely today. You all have a lovely cup of tea, have a break, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.